In this Diablo 4 video, I'm going to be showing you my Bloodshadow build, which is a level 70 plus Necromancer build that's aimed at World Tier 4 that is sort of a continuation of the Vampire build, and how to use the Blood Surge ability in World Tier 4. So this build has a huge focus on overpowering, and there are two ways we get overpower. The first is from using Blood Surge. Every 6th cast of Blood Surge will overpower, and also every 15 seconds you remain healthy, you'll gain an overpower on your next blood attack, thanks to the Rathma's Vigor key passive. This will either be Blood Surge or Blood Mist, depending on what you're doing on the screen and what's happening, and don't count out Blood Mist. Blood Mist actually hits like a truck when you overpower with it, allowing you to move through enemies and wipe out entire packs without having to use Blood Surge even once, depending on the situation. So the general way this build works is that you're going to Blood Mist into a group of enemies, and if you're overpowering, this is going to hit them like a truck. If it's a weak group, they'll probably all die or almost all die. One Blood Surge will clean them up. But if it's a strong pack, this is going to drop corpses on the ground that are going to explode into shadow damage, leaving shadow damage all over the floor, but you're also going to do damage to them as you move through them. This is going to get you into the center of a pack where you want to be, and then as soon as it's done, you're going to drop Corpse Tendrils. Since there'll be corpses on the ground now for you, Corpse Tendrils will grab all the enemies, pull them together, make them vulnerable, and stun them, which is perfect for you, and then you're going to just spam Blood Surge on them, hopefully just decimating them before they can even come out of that stun. One of the great things about this build is it has incredible survivability because you're going to be healing yourself and overhealing yourself, giving yourself Fortify constantly, giving yourself barriers. So you're able to go into these big crowds of enemies and survive where other builds can't. And you're going to just be able to, get in and get out and get in and get out. And keep in mind that every time you overpower, Blood Mist cooldown is going to get reduced. So Blood Mist comes off cooldown rather quickly, and you're just going to reduce this cycle over and over. You're going to Blood Mist in, attack with Corpse Tendrils, and then spam Blood Surge over and over, and then move out if everything's not dead. Wait for them to come off cooldown, and just kind of repeat this over and over until you clean up everything on the battlefield. So let's talk about the equipment that we use for this build. First is on the head, I have Aspect of the Protector here. This is in order to give you a barrier when you fight elites. This aspect is pretty much a staple for much any build in the game, because having that barrier, especially if you roll really high, which I recommend getting, is going to make you, be able to take several hits when you first enter combat against a large group of elites, which you absolutely need. Otherwise, your health is going to plummet, your damage is going to go down, because remember, you're going to deal increased damage when you're healthy, you're going to deal increased damage when you're fortified with this build, so you want to try and stay healthy if possible. One aspect you want to look out for in your helmet is cooldown reduction. This is going to make your Blood Mist cooldown faster, your Corpse Tendrils cooldown faster, and your Bone Storm cooldown faster, and this is one of the item slots that you can get that on, or one type of equipment you can get it on. So look for cooldown reduction if you can. Otherwise, you want to look for stats or anything that's going to improve your protection, damage reduction from, etc., so that you can live longer. Max life is also really, really good, because remember, you get more damage with overpower the higher your health, and also higher health means it's harder for you to, not be healthy, and also harder for you to die. On my chest here, I have Aspect of Explosive Mist. Although I've heard you can get this on your boots, I have never gotten a second copy of it to be able to test. Ideally, this would probably be on your boots if it's possible to go there, but if not, it'll go here. And what this does is it makes it so that Blood Mist detonates corpses as you move through enemies, and this is what's going to cause that shadow damage all over the ground from your Corpse Explosion. It's going to replenish, essence, because Corpse Explosion will replenish essence as you're going through them, and it's going to reduce the cooldown of Blood Mist, allowing you to use it more quickly, which is an absolute necessity in this build. Things you want to look for on this armor are basically damage reduction. Any way you can get life or damage reduction from enemies in any form is what you want to look for. Now, if you can put this aspect on your boots, what I would suggest putting on your chest instead is Aspect of the Shielding Storm, and what this does is it makes it so that each time Bone Storm damages an enemy, you gain a barrier equal to up to 5% of your base life for 10 seconds. This is another huge damage shield when you stack that with Aspect of the Protector and also the other damage reduction and overhealing you get from this build. That makes you really, really tanky when you move into a large pack, so you can't die. Next, I have the Blood-Soaked Aspect, and what's great about this is it makes it so Blood Mist leaves a damage trail of shadow damage as you move through enemies, but more importantly, it removes the movement speed penalty from Blood Mist, allowing you to get to the center of enemies more easily, spread that trail around more, or just get out of harm's way quickly. For my legs, I have the Temerity unique item, and what this item does is it makes it so that effects that heal you beyond 100% of your life, like blood orbs, or if you take a potion, grant you a barrier of up to 80% of your max life. I min-rolled this, unfortunately, which really sucks. But if you pop a potion before you go into combat, then you have an extra barrier. So you'd have the extra barrier, the aspect barrier of Protector, and you'd have Shielding Storms, theoretically, if you had. That's 3 barriers stacked on top of each other. And this is really, really great. It also increases your potion drop rate, gives you lucky hit chance to heal for life, gives you healing received. But this aspect, I cannot, explain to you how valuable it is. Anytime you pick up a Blood Orb, it's going to give you a damage shield. So this is really, really strong, and it makes the build a lot tankier. It's not a must for this build, but you absolutely want it if you can. If you don't have this one, I would suggest having Aspect of the Embalmer on here, and this makes it so that consuming a corpse has a 20 to 30% chance to spawn a Blood Orb. Blood Orbs are going to heal you more, they're going to over-heal you, which will help with your damage. So this is not a bad one to have early on, but you definitely want to try and get these legs eventually. So in my boots here, I'm using the Penitent Greaves, which leaves a frost trail behind you and around you that chills enemies and increases your damage to chilled enemies. This is really great for this build because it's going to set crowd control on anything that's around you, and since you move through enemies with Blood Mist, you're going to chill them constantly with this. It also increases your movement speed, your crowd control duration. So it's really nice to have, but if you can get Aspect of Explosive Mist on your boots, then I would suggest having a boots with them on it instead and using the Shielding Storm, simply because it will give you more tankiness. But if you want more damage, then this is certainly the way to go. Also because we use the glyph Control, which increases your damage against chilled and frozen enemies and crowd-controlled enemies, it's a good pairing with Penitent Greaves. So you can use either Penitent Greaves, or if that Aspect of Explosive Mist is possible on boots, you can use that. So on my weapon, I have a one-handed weapon for faster attack speed so I can get off Blood Surges more quickly, and also because that allows me more aspects. If you use the sword, you'll gain critical damage, which is nice. But the aspect I have on here is the Bloodbath aspect. This makes it so that Blood Surge's Nova echoes again for a short delay, dealing up to 60% less damage. So you basically get like a second Blood Nova, and this is really great when you overpower, because your second Nova will overpower also, even if it's for less damage, and helps you just boost your damage in general. Another great option for your one-hand here is Black River, which is a unique one-handed scythe. It comes with Intelligence, Life on Kill, damage to healthy enemies, ranks of Fueled by Death, and Corpse Explosion. But more importantly, it makes Corpse Explosion consume up to 4 additional courses around the original corpse, dealing increased damage and having a larger radius. And why this is great is because when you use Blood Mist, particularly when there's a pile of corpses on the ground, it usually detonates like 1 to 4 corpses, which only gives you like 24 essence or something like that, and only does a little bit of damage. But if there's a pile of corpses on the ground, and you're consuming 4 additional corpses with every time Corpse Explosion goes off with Blood Mist, you're not only going to get way more essence, you're going to deal way more damage. So this is a really nice addition. And also Life on Kill is great to help keep you alive and keep your health healthy. If you do end up getting this one, I recommend taking the Bloodbath aspect and putting on your gloves instead, and replacing the aspect there, since that's the weakest aspect of the ones we have so far. When it comes to stats on your weapon, you want to look for core skill damage, critical strike damage, intelligence, additional stats, or damage to close, or damage to far enemies, or maybe even damage to slowed or stunned enemies, since you tend to hit enemies that have been, stunned by your corpse tendrils constantly. Then on the offhand, I like to use a focus here for cooldown reduction to get Blood Mist, corpse tendrils, and Bone Storm back off cooldown faster. You could use a shield if you want to be a bit more tanky, but you don't really need it in my opinion. And what I have on here is the aspect of Untimely Death, which makes it so that each percent of your maximum life you heal beyond 100% gives you extra overpower damage on your next attack. Since we overheal constantly with this build via Blood Orbs, Potions, Life on Kill, just tons of different ways to overheal with this build, you're going to have this all the time, and that extra damage is going to apply to your next overpower, and we overpower regularly. So that's really, really a must-have for this build. Other bonuses you want to look out for here are more cooldown reduction, resource generation, damage reductions of any kind, and basically anything that's going to prevent damage to you, or maybe even increase critical strike chance. So on Amulet here, I have Aspect of Grasping Veins, and what this does is it makes it so that you have up to 30% increased critical strike chance for 6 seconds when you cast Corpse Tendrils. That's a huge amount of critical strike chance. That's any critical strike chance you have for 6 seconds after you use the skill. The skill is about a 9-second cooldown, so there's like a 3-second gap where you don't have that. And you also deal up to 90% bonus critical strike damage to enemies that have been damaged by Corpse Tendrils. So when you pull them all together and they're stunned and vulnerable, you're going to hit for 90% more critical strike damage, which is incredible if you have this maxed out. This is single-handedly one of the best aspects that any Necromancer can use because it makes Corpse Tendril a killing machine. Bonuses to look out for here are movement speed, damage after killing elites, or any sort of damage reduction or essence cost reduction. All these are really, really good for this. So for my first ring, I went with the aspect of Rathmas Chosen. This makes it so that whenever one of your blood skills overpowers, you gain up to 50% attack speed for 4 seconds. This is huge because this is going to allow you to spam your blood surge even faster. You know, once you get one overpower, then it's bam, 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 allowing you to really crank out the damage. On your ring, you want to look for critical strike chance, maximum essence, damage after you pick up a blood orb, vulnerable damage, damage to close enemies, or like blood skill damage, or even critical strike damage. And on my second ring, I have aspect of the Umbral here, and that just makes it so that whenever you crowd control an enemy, you gain up to 4 of your primary resource. So every time you use Corpse Tendrils, you're going to gain back a ton of resources, which is great. We primarily use Corpse Explosion after counters to like top up, or even in counters when we need some. Or sometimes we'll use, you know, our basic attack in order to gain essence, like in long, lengthy fights. But you want to try and end fights quickly, and this helps you do that. And you want to look for the same bonuses on this. So moving to Paragon, first thing I did here is go up the board on the right-hand side, and I took the glyph socket with Essence in it. I put the glyph Essence here. This increases your critical strike damage with core skills, so Blood Surge in this case. And they make it so that critical strikes deal even more damage to enemies that are below 80% health, helping you finish them off more quickly. We have a huge focus on critical strikes and critical strike damage with this build. I have 40% critical strike chance by default, but then we have Corpse Tendrils giving me an extra 30% critical strike, and also Bone Storm, while it's active, will give you an extra 20% critical strike chance. That means you have 90% critical strike chance at this point, which means with a couple better rolls and upgrades, you will effectively have 100% critical strike chance if you use Corpse Tendrils while Bone Storm is up. So for our first board here, I've taken Bloodbath, and there are a couple really good rare nodes here. The first one is Guarded Advance, which makes it so that you increase your damage while fortified, as well as increase your fortified generation. Fortified is going to protect you from taking damage and increase your damage in this case. So this makes you tanky while still dealing damage, so you want to grab this one and the nodes around it. You'll then head up and take the legendary node Bloodbath, which makes it so that guaranteed overpower attacks deal 50% more overpower damage, which is fantastic for this build. You'll then head over to the Powerhouse rare node, which increases your damage while healthy, while also increasing your overpower damage, and you'll take all the ones around that before heading more right and up. Make your way up to the second glyph socket, and here you'll want to put Control, which increases your damage to crowd control enemies, and also makes it so you deal increased damage to slowed or chilled enemies if you have the 40 intelligence around it, which you're aiming to do, and also up to 20% increased damage to stunned or frozen, so after you use Corpse Tendrils, it'll be 20%. So these are really, really good, and also if you use the Penitent Greaves, you'll make advantage of that chilled all the time as well. Make sure to pick up the rare node Harden around there to get more damage while fortified, more intelligence, and more damage versus crowd-controlled enemies. And Remedy will also increase your healing received as well as damage to crowd-controlled enemies. Next, we're picking up the Bone Graft board, and you want to make sure you turn the board so that the Reinvigorate node is to the bottom right of where you are, and you're going to go down and pick this up and the nodes around it. What this is going to do is increase your maximum essence and give you essence back on kill, helping propel your machine. This is going to make it so that you don't have as much resource generation issues. Then you're going to head directly up and pick up the socket there, and we're going to drop Blood Drinker into this one. This makes it so that Blood Orbs fortify you for 7% of your max life. This is really good because, again, we have a lot of nodes that give you damage while you're fortified, and fortified helps protect you, so the faster you can fortify, the longer, more often you can fortify, the more damage you're going to deal, and also the more protected you're going to be. So we're going to take this one and try and get 40 intelligence around it so that it also grants bonus to all the magic nodes within range. This means you'll probably have to take the Shaper of Bone rare node here, which gives you bone skill damage and intelligence. Bone skill damage isn't super helpful, but you do use Bone Storm, so this will help increase your damage, and we also have Bone Splinters when using those skills. So I recommend once doing that, you're going to exit either this board or the previous board as quickly as possible and get to the Blood Begets Blood board. You're going to want to rotate this board so that the first rare node close to you is invigorated. What this is going to do is increase your damage while healthy, and also give you damage after you pick up a blood orb. And damage while healthy is really good. There's a lot of nodes around it that increase your damage while healthy. There's also a lot of overpower nodes on this board. The other rare node near it is Aggression, which increases your overpower damage and your damage more. And if you meet the 605 intelligence requirements, you gain even more overpower damage, and there's more overpower damage nodes around this. So this is kind of the direction you want to go to get more overpower damage. Eventually, you'll make your way up and take passives like Recuperate, which increase your potion healing and let you regenerate when you've not been damaged recently. Staying healthy, having high health, and keeping your health topped up are a huge part of this build. You chug potions to give yourself barriers. So you definitely want these ones eventually as well. So some final tips for this build. Remember to use your rotation in order. Try to Blood Mist into enemies, then use Corpse Tendrils. Then once everything's done, try and drop your Blood Surge. Wait for that stun if possible sometimes, particularly if your essence is low, because if you start spamming it early and you run out of essence in the middle of that, you're going to be in trouble. Or maybe your overpower pops, but they're not vulnerable and stunned yet. So try and hold it if you can, unless it's really dangerous. Otherwise, start spamming away. Pay attention on how much time is left until your next overpower with this build. Don't overpower a single random enemy and then run into combat and then not have overpower for 10 seconds. I tend to run by stragglers and to seek out large groups of enemies, round them up, and then attack, because it's just a waste of time to spend the same amount of time to kill one enemy as it would 20 enemies with this build. Another thing with this build is don't be afraid to run away until your cooldowns come back, or wait for your cooldowns to go into pulse. If your cooldowns are not ready, if you don't have them set up, or you're out of rhythm, you can die really easily with this build. Make sure that you get into the rhythm with this build, and you sort of, you'll learn that as you play this build, and don't do anything until you're in that rhythm, otherwise you kind of make a mistake and you might get yourself killed. So that wraps up our Bloodshadow build. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It is a ton of fun. If you love an AoE-centric build, if you love just going into Helltides and packs of enemies and Nightmare Dungeons, just mowing them all down in seconds, this is definitely a build you should try.